So don't mind the dirtiness of this bike. It's still technically wintertime here in Northeast PA, and she's still out being ridden. But in doing this voltage regulator, making the video was really dark in the garage. So instead of showing you how to do this voltage regulator, I'm going to tell you it's really not hard at all. You have to remove these two screws right here. Your voltage regulator is this section right below it with the fins. So on top of those two screws, you then have this plastic cover unclips right here and then just pulls straight out. And you'll see under here where there's two rubber grommets that this fits in to put it back. But once you have this plastic cover off, you're going to have two more screws down below. The one on this side is kind of hidden behind a couple harnesses, and then you have a Torx head screw over there as well. So those two screws and the two lower screws. You then also have to undo these hoses to the radiators. Slide the hose clips up, use a pair of pliers to push them off of these metal stems. Once you have that done, you'll be able to pull this bracket forward enough to get to the back side of the voltage regulator, and then you're going to have four more screws to disconnect the voltage regulator from this frame. That's all there is to physically removing the voltage regulator. So now in testing your stator is located right inside here, and right here is where you can see the harness comes out, and on some other vehicles are in different spots, like Sportsters are underneath, things like that. But then right here is the plug. So you can unplug it right here and do all your tests on the stator before you even get into removing the voltage regulator. That way, if this is your issue, you don't have to mess with the voltage regulator. So now here's the old voltage regulator. You can see the four screws on the back side I was talking about that need to be removed. And then I want to show you how to undo these clips. So it actually goes on the bike like this. This is the one to the stator I just showed you. All you're doing is lifting up on these clips and the harnesses will pull right out. So it's going to be dark when you get on your bike, but when you go to remove this side, same thing. You're just going to pop this up and then that harness pulls straight down. So to put it back in, you're just going to push it up and then just push this clamp right down over it. That's all there is to removing the two harnesses on here. So now for the process of actually testing the voltage regulator and stator, stay tuned. So we're going to take a look at the voltage regulator and testing the stator. Now, I put the battery back in this after sitting over the winter time, and my display was asking for a pin, which I never knew I had one. I got all that figured out. I finally got the bike started. As soon as I moved down the road, all the lights went out and the display went out, but the bike still ran. A couple days later, I noticed that the voltmeter was spiking to the very end, which is no good. So we're gonna take a look at how to test what you have going on with your bike. Other symptoms of a bad voltage regulator would be if your lights blink, like they flash, they dim, they don't work at all, the engine could sputter, things like that. So we're gonna go ahead and get started here. First thing we wanna do is test our battery itself and make sure the battery's good. So we're gonna be checking for 12 volts. Now I'm not gonna take all this hoopla off here. I'm just gonna stick my probes down in there on the ground and on the hot, and we're gonna see what kind of voltage we have. Okay, so with your voltmeter set to 20 volts DC, we're gonna check the battery. Okay, and I'm a little bit low here at 11.84, but that's still good. The bike's been sitting for a little bit, so that's not bad. So the battery, I'm gonna call this good. You should be reading about 12.5 ideally. But if you're like at like 9 volts or 10 volts, then you have an issue with the battery. Next, we're going to start the bike up and test the voltage again. Now, when I do this, initially we are going to see the voltage drop to about 10 volts. That's normal. After that, it should stabilize around 14.5. If the voltage goes above, like up to 15 or more, definitely have a problem with the voltage regulator. If it stays between 14, 14.4, the voltage regulator is good. So you saw it do a quick drop to 10, and now it's climbing. This is really, really bad. You don't want this much voltage going to it. Go ahead and shut it off. Okay, that's bad. So what I'm thinking is going on is my display and everything shut off as like a safety mechanism to keep it from frying. People have fried their entire wiring harnesses by having too much voltage go through the system. The stator puts out, and the stator's right behind our derby cover here, the stator puts out an AC current So that current is going to be 32 to 56 volts. You're going to get about 16 to 28 volts per 1,000 RPM roughly. It then feeds into the voltage regulator, which is that piece with the fins right there. The voltage regulator, and referred to as a rectifier on some older bikes, then takes that AC current and converts it to DC and limits it as it feeds the rest of the bike. So we have that 32 to 56 volts coming into the voltage regulator and coming out as 12 to 14.4 volts to the system. When that malfunctions, we get an over voltage situation, which is what we have here, and that can fry the system. If you have an under voltage system, say the battery's only reading 12.5 or 13 while it's running, we then need to test the stator, make sure the stator's good. If the stator's putting out what it's supposed to, then that would also be an issue with the regulator. But since we have an over voltage problem, we know the stator's good. It's obviously putting out what it needs to. The voltage regulator's not decreasing it to what it should. But we're still going to cover testing the stator. Now in testing the stator, you can see right here where the wiring goes into the case. Now on Sportsters, I'm told they're underneath. They can be in different spots, but on this particular model it goes in right here, and you see the harness rolls around and plugs into the voltage regulator right here. We can pull that out right there, and right here is where we're going to test the stator. Now you could have 2 holes or you could have 3, depending if you have a 2-stage system or a 3. So what we're going to be doing here are 2 different tests, a continuity test and an ohms test. For the continuity, we're going to set our voltmeter to continuity. We are going to put 1 lead in each of these holes at a time, and the other lead's going to be grounded to the bike. We should not hear a tone or see a reading on the meter. If we do, then that means we have a short somewhere in the stator and it's going to need replaced. Now my leads are long enough that I can stretch my voltmeter to use the battery ground up here. So there's our first hole. There's our second. And there's our third. And we have no readings on the meter and no tone. That's good. So before I do my ohms test, first thing I want to do is verify what the resistance of the tool itself is. So I'm going to touch these leads together. Should be getting roughly like 0.4, so 0.5. And so we want 0.1 to 0.3 across the terminals. So we're going to add that 0.5 of the tool into that. So we should be looking for 0.6 to 0.8. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come up here, 0.7, and we're going to be doing every combination of these 3 terminals. 0.7, and 0.7. So the stator is good by all tests. So once we've determined the stator's good, we've narrowed it down to our voltage regulator. So now we're going to go ahead and remove that. On this particular bike, we're going to have 2 upper screws and 2 lower screws to remove. And we're going to need to disconnect 2 upper coolant lines to pull the assembly forward and then get to the screws that mount the voltage regulator to the actual frame. So let's go ahead and cover that. Alright, so there's our old one there. Here's a new one we got from Drag Specialties. Harley wanted $260 for theirs. Drag Specialties had this one for, I think it was $185. Looks the same to me. Probably made by the same kids in the same warehouse in China. You see, they are identical. So we're going to go ahead and install this now. We're going to put this in there, put our 4 screws in. Make sure you connect your harness up. And you know, you had those 2 upper frame bolts, the 2 lowers, and the coolant line. So go ahead and take care of all that, and then we'll go ahead and continue from there. So again, we got the voltmeter set to DC volts, and we're gonna take a look, see what we got here. So there we have our 12.5, and we're gonna start the bike up. So that's right where we want to be. We're near 14 volts. Anything over 13.5 is good. Under 13.5 is where you would be concerned about a possible under voltage situation. But we're not spiking up to 16, 17, 18. So that was our issue. This bike is fixed and ready to roll. I really hope this video helped you out. If it did, please hit the channel with a like and subscribe. Always more Harley stuff coming. Just if you don't want all the other stuff I post, because it's a wide array, just go ahead